spanning more than 1 decade, what should ordinarily be a simple act of updating Nigeria's electoral law, correcting clear defects, stood like a monster too deadly to combat. Nothing save series of machinations and dirty intrigues, inter and intra-political party schemes explain the circumlocution that has ended the long-drawn amendment exercise. Yet, as politicians across parties took their turns to be victimized by the spectre, the need to stand firm and effect necessary changes in the electoral law became more compelling. It is against that backdrop that in February 2022, the 2022 Electoral Act by President Muhammadu Buhari comes into bold screen. The occasion offered serious evaluation of most of the issues that had for a long time stood on the way of electoral transparency and fidelity of its outcomes. A look at the amended Electoral Act showed that the political mischief associated, for instance, with the practice of transmitting electoral votes and figures across many stations after the actual voting at polling units may have been defeated amongst quite a host of other gains that the new Electoral Act has been able to achieve. Today, we will be discussing these issues towards election 2023, changes in the Electoral Act, and its implication towards Nigeria's 2023 elections. On the list today, we have a number of guests drawn, considering their very high input in the bill before it became an act. One of such persons are Samson Itodo, who is the Executive Director, NiGAC Africa, Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough, God Bless Otubure, President, Ready to Lead Africa, and Honorable Tajuddin Yusuf, popularly known as TJIO. Just briefly, before we go into the session properly, I'd like to quickly take the citations of our guest. Samson Itodo, Executive Director, NiGAC Africa, an experienced community organizer and development practitioner with over a decade of experience in constitution building, governance reform, electoral governance, civic engagement, and political organizing. Highly skilled in legislative advocacy, political party development, NGO management, social movement, and youth development. Invested in building strong democratic institutions, promoting people-centered legislation and policies, and building communities of active citizens to drive social change. Serves as the Executive Director, NiGAC Africa, and convener of the Not Too Young to Run movement. Background in law and postgraduate degree in law and public policy. Next, we take Yemi Adamolekun, currently serves as the Executive Director of Enough is Enough Nigeria, a network of individuals and organizations committed to building a culture of good governance and accountability in Nigeria through active citizenship. Yemi has a 20-year diverse career spanning the public and private sectors in the United States and Nigeria. She volunteers for Kalewa House, an NGO founded by her late mother, and Kudirat Initiative for Democracy Kind. She is dedicated to the advancement of women. In 2018, she was named as one of the most influential people of Africa, MIPAD, endorsed by the United Nations in the humanitarian and religious category. Yemi has a first degree in mathematics and economics from the University of Virginia an MSc in Development Studies from the London School of Economics, and an MBA from Oxford University's Said Business School. Up next, we'll take God Bless Otuburen. God Bless has over 8 years cognate experience working with international institutions, multinationals, underserved communities, fresh categories, federal and state governments and institutions focusing on job creation, youth capacity building and income generation, employability and enterprise skill, political and economic leadership development. God Bless is a 2019 Mandela Washington Fellow and the founder of Ready to Lead Africa in partnership with the Presidential Precinct USA, as well as current Lagos State Coordinator of the Not Too Young to Run movement, where he works with youth groups across Nigeria to increase the number of young elected political office holders in public elected offices. God Bless is also founder of the NGO Clothe the Child Foundation that supports kids in poor communities across Nigeria. God Bless holds a BSc in Political Science and Public Administration Education from the University of Benin, Nigeria, and an Executive Master's in Project Management from CUP UK, that's CUPE UK, an affiliate of Project People Nigeria. God Bless is the convener of the Africa Arising Future Leaders Political and Economic Leadership Forum in partnership with the US government via the US Consulate in Lagos, Professor Pat Toby and Olakunle Surian. God Bless is the creator of the Future Leaders Incubators FLI secondary school project designed to aggressively change public secondary schools building and learning patterns in Nigeria. And lastly, we take that of Honorable Yusuf Tajuddin. He is a Nigerian politician at the House of Representative level. He currently serves as a federal representative representing Kababunu Ijumu constituency in the 9th National Assembly. He is a former chairman, House Committee on Capital Markets and Institutions. In 2011, Honorable Tajuddin ran for the Kababunu Ijumu Federal Consensus seat in Nigeria's 7th National Assembly and won in 2015 and 2019. He was re-elected to the same position. Between 2015 and 2019, he served as the chairman of the House Committee on Capital Markets and Institutions, while also serving as a member of the following committees: Information Committee, Technology Committee, Finance Committee, Ports, Harbors and Waterways, Information and National Orientation Committee, Sports Committee, House Committee on FEMA, the House Public Accounts Committee, and the House Committee on Human Rights. Between 2011 and 2015, Honorable TJ served as the Deputy Chairperson of the House Committee on Information Communication Technologies. Over the years, Honorable TJ has received numerous awards in recognition of his public service achievements. And my humble self, Abraham Onoja, the Director of Public Relations for the Nigerian Global Affairs Council. And like I earlier mentioned, today we will be discussing towards elections 2023, changes in the Electoral Act and its implications towards the Nigeria's 2023 elections. And we will now be taking our guest speakers, Mr. Samson Itodo. Mr. Samson, please, are you with us? While we await Mr. Samson, do we have Yemi with us, please? We'd like to take Yemi and God Bless, please. Can you please unmute and turn on your videos, please?
All right, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I think I can hear you now. I
Oh,
am,
fantastic. Thank you so
I,
much. God bless for joining us today. So good to have you join us,
thank
despite
you
your
so much
very
for having
busy and tight schedule. Thank you so much. I mean, you played an active role in the bill before it became an act. So can you please give us a background to this bill? What led to it? What were the major changes that took place? How did you go about the bill being put together, the corrections, the input from different platforms and channels and all of that, please? Can you please give us a background to this, please?
Okay, thank you so much. I want to thank NiGAC for the invitation and also appreciate the fact that we have a lot of great minds who are on this call at this moment. And I by no means I will not in any way come across as having the overall knowledge of what happened or taking glory for any of the outcomes that we have today. I'll just talk about the role Ready to Lead Africa played in the design and the work that we put in, especially the organizing part to make sure that we got electoral reforms done. I remember it was 2019 December when I just came back from the US, and myself, Samson Itodo, and about 34 other, 36 other state leaders from across Nigeria gathered in Abuja. Then I was the Not Too Young to Run Lagos State Coordinator. And at that meeting, the final outcome of that meeting was that the most important legislation that Nigeria needs after the Not Too Young to Run bill that was signed in 2018, that the most important legislation was electoral reforms. And we gave ourselves a target that we're going to do electoral reforms by 2020. So we left Abuja, everybody went back to their state. We were still in Lagos at that time. We were working out from Lagos, and COVID happened. So 2020, COVID happened, and we had to re-strategize to think about the approach we're going to use to engage the system. One of the most important things that I think is worthy of mention is that we use the occasion of June 12 as a strategic opportunity to mobilize and organize for the National Assembly to consider the electoral reforms bill that had just been rejected. And I'm so excited that TJ is here. He was one of the first people that endorsed the Youth March Forward for Electoral Reforms campaign at the National Assembly. He spoke for us. He was part of the group of House of Rep members that connected us to other members, because we were not just protesting outside, we were lobbying on the inside. We were looking at clause by clause and telling them this is why we think this should change. So the strategy was, beyond organizing and doing programs on the outside, what Ready to Lead Africa did was that we needed to also have, impact on the inside. So we did all that. 2020, we had the 60 chapters of Ready to Lead Africa movement organized, and we figured out one strategy that really worked, which is to work through the state constituency offices of lawmakers, both at the House of Reps and at the Senate levels. So rather than submit petitions or position paper in Abuja, we used our state chapters to get to our senators. And for the first time, senators came on the floor and said, look, people are ambushing me at home. My staff members are calling me from my village and saying that there are some young people that are saying that I am the one that is standing against the electoral reform bill, because we had to put them on the defense, And that continued all up until 2022, when we had No. In 2021, we also had the Electoral Reform Summit in Transcorp. We followed up with, with series of other engagements. Of course, we partnered with NiGAC Africa, Next Gen, Raising New Voices. And then we also sort of worked very closely with INEC, where we met with the National Electoral Commissioner at the headquarters in Abuja with our coalition. So it was constant. It was a constant strategy of organizing and not agonizing that got us to where we are. So, and as I round this off, I would say some of the major highlights that we have achieved, especially the biggest one, is electronic transmission of results. You can see the contentious one right now that was added, clause 84. Of course, the fact that you see the cost for to buy nomination form for House of Assembly and state and reps and all of that has been reduced. It's just that what we wanted for the presidency was we wanted it to be pegged at 10 million, but that didn't happen. Now, if you see the fact that INEC is not better empowered, so the monies INEC need to run elections are now going to be gotten way before time. And then there are other important progress that we've made. And also, let me say this, that Ready to Lead Africa met with Aisha Duku. We submitted a position paper to her many times. So we're constantly engaging with the office and also the office of the Deputy Senate President. Those were the two principal actors on the bill. And of course, Senator Gaia was also very instrumental in our work. So we combined youth advocacy and stakeholders engagement. We didn't make them see us as the opposition. We constantly told them the benefit of a new electoral act, as it will also support their own dreams and aspirations. So that was how we were able to work with other people, and we got it done. But see, I would say this, that there is really no reason why Nigerians should doubt the possibility of change, the possibility of getting it right? The possibility of doing it right. That is why right now we've moved on from electoral reforms bill. Now we are doing ready to vote, and we're going from state to state, working with our local partners to do same-day registration, same-day biometrics capture, so that people can have their PVC, and those PVCs will count in 2023. So generally, that has been our impact, that has been our work. And we are also grateful to institutions like EIA that also played a role in ensuring that the bill was passed. And it is also good to know that Ready to Lead Africa was one of the organizations on the floor of the House, invited specially to witness that history. So on Thursday, when the first rancor broke out, we saw everything with our eyes, and were invited again on Friday so that we can be there to see the process. Even when it went to the conference committee and when it came back from the presidency, we were carried along step by step. So I think that's what we were able to do. And right now, we're trying to consolidate on the gains of what we've achieved with the electoral reforms bill that has now become an act. Thank you so much for having me.
Wow, thank you so much. God bless. I mean, running an account of how Ready to Lead Africa was really involved in the process from the bill point till it became an act is quite commendable from this end. So thank you very much. God bless. Next, we'll quickly take Yemi Adamolekun, who is the Executive Director. Enough is enough. Yemi, can you hear me, please?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can, but we can't see you, actually.
Yeah, it's deliberate. I was moving out from somewhere. Sorry, I had a flashing event, so I just had to walk out. Can you see me now?
Oh, yes, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. So good to have you here. Okay, okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. So some minutes ago, God bless just took us through the role Ready to Lead Africa played in the bill before it became an act, and even after what they are planning to do. Can you also give us an account of the role you played and your organization, that's Enough is Enough, the role you played in the bill, the passage of the bill to becoming an act, please?
Okay, because I can only speak once, I will focus less on that because I don't think it's important. Rather just sort of focus on the power that the electoral act has given us moving forward.
Okay, sorry. Can you move the microphone closer to your mouth? I can't hear you clearly.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now clearly.
Much better. All right. So I was saying that rather than do that, I'll focus on what the act means moving forward, because unfortunately, this is the only time I'll be able to speak. I'll have to go to the parallel event when I'm done. And I think President Buhari must really be commended for signing the Electoral Act despite the pressure that he got. As we joke about now, just for context, when he sent back the bill in December last year, what was the issue was that the act only had direct primaries. Direct primaries would mean that every political party would have to publish the names of all their members. And so all their members would then be responsible for voting for whoever, for the aspirant, for the candidate to emerge. This would be much better for our election or our democracy in Nigeria because it allows the party members to have a bit more control of the party. Right now, as we know, governors own parties and party leaders, quote unquote, as they are called. But President Buhari returned the bill in December saying that it would include indirect primaries, which basically means delegates. So every party has what constitutes their delegates who are able to then make a decision, who then vote on who the candidate is. And then in an interview with channels, I believe in January, he also then added consensus candidates as well. Now, when the National Assembly returned the bill to him, they had inserted a clause, a very interesting clause, which basically says that if you're a political appointee, i.e. a minister, head of the central bank, attorney general of the federation, that you will not be able to vote or be voted for. So i.e. you basically cannot participate in the primaries of your party while maintaining your political appointment. So therefore, if the central bank governor that people are touting, Emefiele, wants to run for president, quote unquote, he would have to resign as central bank governor. That's what that means in real terms. But obviously, political appointees didn't want that. There was a big hullabaloo. And that's what led to citizens coming out to protest on the day that it would have affected the timing of our elections. And we were saying, look, just sign this thing. If you then want any edits done, you can send it back. And since the National Assembly, as for the most part, as someone says, they're like a unit in the presidency, you will get your way. Just sign it and then send it back. He didn't sign it on Tuesday, but he signed it on Friday. And that is basically what has happened. He now sent a letter basically saying, so, gentlemen, I, Bajabi Amila and Senator Lawan, per our discussion, please take this clause 8412 or section 8412 out of the Electoral Act. Senator Lawan tried to bring it up on the floor, and senators were like, heck no, we're not removing it. So it stayed. Some people have gone to court. Then there's a rumor that a judge was paid a large sum of money to suddenly, within I think 10 days, and we know our judicial process is not that fast. From the day it was filed to the day judgment was given and order given, 10 days for that clause to be removed from the Electoral Act. It has not been implemented, and interestingly, the APC, who's having their convention today, has chosen to honor the section, even though there's a court judgment throwing it out. Actually, that's not true. There are two court judgments. One is throwing it out, one threw out the case that you can't delete it. So they haven't implemented it, and APC, the party, has decided to obey it for their conventions. So which I think is actually really very interesting in just to show how the Electoral Act is impacting, before we even get to the main elections, really, is impacting where we are now. There was a post by President Buhari on his behalf basically saying, look, this party, we have to get our acts together because the guideline that's in the Electoral Act, if we don't do convention today, we will have a problem. And that's true. The Electoral Act is very detailed. Primaries must start in April and end in June. So if as a party you don't have a convention in March, who's going to run your primaries? Who's going to be your party chairman to run primaries? So the president, so I say all that to say that the Electoral Act, while far from perfect, I think even in the fact that they have forced APC as a party to ensure that it had a convention today and ensure it's sort of following the guidelines of the act really says a lot. And I'll pick 3 other things that I think are quite important from the Electoral Act. One is electronic transmission of results that God bless mentioned. Secondly, it's given more access to persons with disabilities. So every polling unit must know how many people need Braille, how many people need a ramp so they can get to a place where they can vote and things of that nature. Number 3, it says that every pre-election matter, court matter, must be settled before elections. So we don't have the situation where you have an election, somebody is declared a winner, and then you're like, oh, by the way, another court case now overturns it, and the person who's number 3 or number 2 now becomes governor. But anything that's a pre-election matter must be settled before elections. And another one that for me is particularly important is the fact that it now gives INEC powers to overturn announcements, so to speak. So in the past, if I'm a returning officer, if someone put a gun to my head and I say that Samson, who just joined us, Samson has won an election, it can only be overturned in court. But what the Electoral Act now does is if INEC is aware, and I as the electoral officer tell INEC that they put a gun to my head, well, this is not the real result. So INEC, with its own powers, can overturn that announcement, and it doesn't have to go to court, which I think is fantastic for our elections. So on that note, I'll drop. With Samson, you have history of the act and everything added to it so that he can continue. Thank you very much for inviting me, and my apologies for the clash.
Thank you so much, Yemi, for joining us today. Thank you so much. God bless also for your input. Up next, we'll be taking Samson Itodo. Samson Itodo is the Executive Director, NiGAC Africa. Mr. Samson, can you hear me? Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Please confirm you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you, but I can't see you actually.
Unfortunately, I'm unable to start my video because I'm in a noisy place. I had this mix up with the time because I'm not in the country. And so apologies for joining later.
Oh, okay. Not a problem. Thank you so much for joining us despite your very busy and tight schedules, as it may appear. Quickly, right? We've had God bless Otubure and Yemi, who gave us account of their role in the electoral bill, the role they played in the electoral bill before it became an act. So quickly, I know you are at the forefront of this, yourself and other persons. Can you please give us a rundown to the history, how it came about, the processes and all of that of the bill before it became an act, and even after it became an act, what you're still doing on that regards, please?
All right. First, thank you very much for the invitation to speak with you guys, and I do apologize for the mix-up in time. Well, if you have Yemi and God bless on the panel and they've spoken, even though I didn't listen to them, I would endorse all their contributions because we're all in the trenches organizing for the passage of the electoral bill. So I will just raise three issues. First, I will talk about, what are the principles that cut across different provisions in the Act. And then I'll, talk about the sources of some of those provisions in the Act. And lastly, just talk about where we go from here, because I believe when I came in, I heard Yemi talk about some of the provisions. So there's no need deliberating that. One of the first things I'd like us to note is this particular act, which is a new act, is the third sort of Repeal and Reenactment Act, an election law. And what that means is, since return to democracy, we've had several electoral laws, but this is the third law that what we call a new law, a new electoral law. The first one was in 2001, and in 2001, there was an amendment to the 2001 Act right after we returned to democracy. After the 2001, we had the 2002 Act, then we had the 2010 Act, and now we have the 2022 Act. So this particular piece of legislation that we have, it's a culmination of the 3 amendments that were made to the 2010 Electoral Act. And so please note that this law that we have is a new piece of legislation. So it's not an amendment act like the media, has communicated to Nigerians. And I think it's actually confusing. It's not an amendment act. It is a repeal and a reenactment act. So we have a new law. The second issue around the principles that cut across this legislation. So one, it's about cost-saving measures were introduced in this particular bill. Because of the rising cost of elections and the culture of waste in organizing elections, some of the provisions introduced in the law seek to reduce the cost of elections. And I'll give you a practical example. Previously, if a matter is filed before the court, so if someone sues a candidate for false information contained in the forms that they submit to INEC, what the court would normally do is to either suspend the election or cancel that election and order that a fresh election be conducted. But now, with this new law, a fresh election will not be conducted. Instead, if the court determines that a candidate does not qualify to hold or run for the office, what the court will now do is to disqualify that candidate and his party and then award judgment to the second party or candidate who secured the highest number of votes. That way, we will not be conducting elections regularly where court nullifies elections on the basis of either non-qualification of a candidate for an election. The second, sort of principle was around increasing the transparency of the process. I know we've talked about, previous speakers have talked about transmission of results, electronic accreditation. All of these processes are geared towards deepening the integrity of the electoral process. So now we actually have electronic voting, electronic transmission of results, and electronic accreditation of voters permitted by the current law. So if INEC wants to deploy, electronic transmission, it is protected to do that. And all this just aims at deepening the transparency and the integrity of the process. The other third principle was around safeguarding the independence of INEC. Some provisions in the law, guarantees and safeguards INEC independence. And as you can see, a few days ago, the Supreme Court issued a judgment, upholding INEC's disqualification of some political parties. Those parties went to court to challenge INEC's disqualification because they didn't meet the provisions under Section 225 of the Constitution, to the effect that for you to remain a registered political party, you must have won election, whether at the local government or even state assembly election. So they were disqualified. And the court upheld INEC decision. What the court did indirectly was to reinforce INEC's independence, that INEC does have the power in the Constitution, to disqualify, to deregister political parties. You also see provisions in the Act that grants INEC discretionary powers. So you see provisions like ABCD can happen subject to a procedure prescribed by the Commission. Now, what it does is it gives INEC the latitude to exercise discretion over the procedure for elections. If you want to have credible and peaceful and inclusive elections, you've got to grant, INEC some discretionary powers to take action. And so that's some of the principles, that underpin the electoral law. What are the sources of some of the provisions? One major source of the provisions in the current law are judicial pronouncements on election petitions in the past. So let me give you a classic example. One, the Supreme Court, held in several cases, in the Rivers State case, in Akwa Ibom, in Abia governorship elections, that, the smart card reader that was used for voter accreditation, though a novel technological solution to limiting electoral fraud, but it is not recognized by the law. And so the Supreme Court asked or advised the National Assembly and INEC to go and propose amendments to the electoral law. But what the National Assembly now did was, based on the pronouncement of the court, they have now, introduced provisions in the law that legalizes electronic transmission of results. So the one source is judicial pronouncement. The second source of some of the provisions is based on the experiences of politicians in previous elections. So you see, in the course of the whole electoral reform process, there were intrigues, there were controversies, around some certain provisions like electronic transmission of results, or like the current debate around whether political appointees, should resign before a party primaries or before they run for elections. So some of the provisions reflect, experiences of politicians who have either been victims of the implementation of certain laws, or they've been victims of election rigging. The third major source, some of the proposals or provisions in the law are based on observation of international observer groups as well as domestic observer groups. After every election observer groups submit reports. So those provisions in the Act align with some of the recommendations from international election observer groups as well as civil society groups. A classic example is the provision that grants INEC or strengthens INEC's financial independence. So these are the sources. But where do we go from here? The law is currently in force. And now that the law is in force, we need to socialize, we need to increase public awareness on the provisions of the Act, because the Act changes a lot of things in our electoral process, things like timelines. As you can see, party primaries are going to start early. By June, second week of June, the primaries would have concluded, and so candidates, political parties will send list of candidates to INEC. But after June, the law also gives political parties about 60 days in the event they want to substitute candidates. So if you're in this call, or you're on this call and you know anyone, who is interested in running for office, after the primaries in June, they should stay vigilant until October, when the final list of candidates are submitted. Because in between June and October, or end of September, political parties can still substitute candidates. And sometimes they may not have any legitimate reason for doing so. So vigilance is key. There are issues around commencement of campaigns, and I can go on and on, but we need to get a copy of this law. We need to know the provisions in this law, and see how we can defend our own rights and keep watch over the electoral process. So I think those are the thoughts that I just wanted to share. I'm sure the previous speakers have talked about the value of collecting your PVCs, to get registered, collect your PVCs and get ready to vote. So I need not belabor that anymore. So over.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Samson Itodo, for joining us and for sharing so much insight into the bill, and then the Act now. Thank you so much for so much work you and the other organizations put together in ensuring that we're able to get this electoral bill act to be the bill to becoming an act. Now, just a few questions, right? But before I go over that, I'd like to appeal to everyone to please drop their questions in the comment area, the chat box, and we will certainly direct it to the guest appropriately. Mr. Sampson and Mr. Godbless, just to direct these questions, right? So at some point, you made mention of the fact that the aim is also to reduce costs, right? But we find out that, for instance, today, the cost of the national chairmanship for APC, for instance, was pegged at almost about 20 million naira, and all of that, 20 and then 10 million naira and all of that. Even though PDP were saying that for you to pick up your nomination form for, I think, governorship or presidency or State House of Assembly members, I think there's a 50% discount, right? Now, just to ask, saying APC are conducting their convention today, I wouldn't want to dwell so much on that until maybe they're done with the process and all of that. Then we can talk about that later. But at the moment, right, 20 million naira, yes, for the national chairmanship. And then looking at 2 million naira, that's PDP House of Reps and all of that. Don't you think that amount is maybe slightly too high, despite the fact that there's a 50% discount for young persons who want to run for elective offices come 2023? That is one. Secondly, are we really ready for, are we prepared rather for electronic transmission of results? It's actually open. Mr. Sampson can respond, or God bless. I mean, it's open.
Okay, so just to speak on the points around the cost. So in elections, we look at the administrative part of elections as well as the political part. So when I say cost of elections, I'm limiting myself to the cost of election administration and not the cost of politics or the cost of running for office, because these are two different sets of costs. And the truth is, on both ends, the cost is quite high. The budget for the 2023 election is about 305 billion naira. The National Assembly approved 302 billion naira. So that's what it's going to cost Nigeria, to conduct elections. And the worst part, that every voter who is on the voter register costs the country a particular amount of money. Because in election administration and planning, election budget is designed per the cost to a voter. Because every voter will have about 5 ballot papers. Every voter will have a voter's card. All of these things come with a cost. So when you put the sum total, you discover it's quite high, and I need not talk more about that. But the cost is really high, and why is the cost high? Is because of our attitude and our approach to public leadership and politics, which needs to change. I see no reason why political parties will charge candidates this amount of money. One of the excuses that they give is, in the absence of state funding for political parties, parties are meant to generate their own income. So through the sales of forms, that's how they generate their income. But in other climes, it is political parties that fund and support candidates, and not candidates funding political parties. And until we change that normally within our own context, we're still going to be grappling with issues around internal democracy, because loyalty and the ability of a political party to uphold democratic principles, it's limited when members of political parties are not taxed to paying dues, or they are not making individual contributions. Then they don't have a say. So you have hegemons who are able to spend, for the political party and determining who gets what. So governors in their states, have most of the party officials on their payroll, so these things got to stop. I think on the transmission of results, is Nigeria ready for transmission of results? My answer is yes, yes, yes. It won't be the first time that will be transmitting results electronically. We've done that in previous elections. We just need to one, shore up our systems to prevent any form of whether I call them hacks or just strengthen the digital security, but also the level of transparency is critical. And there are four issues that have shaped this discourse around electoral technology. The first one is the cost. And what will it cost the country? Won't it increase the cost of our elections? The truth is there's no cost that is too high to pay for democracy. But in making such expenditure, Nigerians need to get value for their money. The second is the infrastructure. Do we have the infrastructure? Do we have both the tech, both the hard and the software, to cater for this? And my answer is yes. If we don't have it, Nigeria can get it. We have what it takes. The third is around, digital security. How are we able to protect those systems from hacks, from attacks, by politicians? INEC's website and the result portal, they has recorded several attempts, to hack into those systems. How do we protect the systems in a way that it doesn't it doesn't result to computer-generated leaders, but leaders that actually enjoy the sovereignty as well as the endorsement of the general public. And fourth is around socialization. How do we encourage people, to understand how these systems work, but also trust the system? Because if we're voting manually and people don't trust the fact that people show up, they record the results in their presence, it's when you transmit electronically, when you automate your system, where you can no longer see how results are being transmitted, that you will trust the system. We're paying this high cost because of the deficit of trust in the public space. And if we're going to fix this, it's going to begin with, one, Nigerians and you and I changing our attitude towards government, but also government also demonstrating that it is willing, it is capable, and is determined to build and mobilize mutually constructive relationships with citizens by being very open. So it starts by being open with Nigerians. And if we don't see that level of openness, there's no damn way we're going to trust our public institutions. But sometimes we also need to give these institutions a benefit of doubt, because I've seen in my little years of work in Nigeria that even when a particular public policy serves the interests of the public and a government institution is being very open with Nigerians, the more open you are, the more Nigerians even distrust you, because we find it very difficult to trust these institutions. And it's no fault of ours. It's just that we have to come to a meeting ground. And I want to urge that for us who are Nigerians who are on the call, that we begin to also change our attitudes. Where we see government institutions, performing, let's give them the requisite support that they need, because that support is what makes institutions, become more responsive to the earnings of Nigerians. I'm sorry that I will have to leave the call now, like I indicated earlier, that I'm in a very noisy place, and I had this mix up with the time. If I have your permission, moderator, I might have to leave now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us, Mr. Samson Itodo. I know we still have Mr. God Bless Otukure with us. Mr. God Bless, can you please confirm you're still with us, please?
Yes, I am. Just
Okay.
like Samson, I'm in between two conversations, so I'm sorry I'm here, but I should run anytime.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so before you run, please, let's direct this one question or these two questions to you, because I thought we were going to direct it to Mr. Samson Itodo, but seeing he just dropped, maybe you just respond to them quickly, even as we also plan to round up. It's actually a 1 hour conversation, and we're already 9 minutes to the close of this session, actually. So Adewale Ayemonase is asking, says, what is the INEC doing about collection of PVC to avoid disenfranchising potential voters? That's one. Secondly, NiGAC is also asking about the issues around election officials declaring that they were coerced into releasing a result? That's one. Secondly, how can we safeguard this process to ensure it is not abused? That's two. And then thirdly, he's saying that are there safeguards? The question was directed to Yemi, but Yemi also is in between, I think, other activities at the moment. So I don't know if you can respond to them.
Okay, so let me try and be very sure that I get hitting it right on the head of it. So let's take the one about safeguards. Sorry, let me just pull up the chat. And so NiGAC is asking the issue around election officials declaring result under duress, right?
Yes.
Now, this is the safeguards that we have been able to put into this new law is that INEC is now empowered by law to review that decision within a week. So if an INEC official tells the commission that I did not declare this result willingly, that I declare this result under duress, what it means is that INEC can overturn that result. That is the safeguard that you need. But that it will not happen is dependent on the willingness of the political actor. So are we going to have candidates who are willing to go to the extra mile to coerce people to declaring them winners? That we do not know. That I cannot say. But I can tell you that any politician or any political actor who coerces anybody to declare him or her the winner of an election should also remember and be informed that we would undeclare that person too. That is your safeguard. And then the next question is, are there provisions in the Electoral Act that can be shared with people to discourage voter apathy? There are provisions that we've shared. 10 primary reasons that we have done as CSOs. The Electoral Act is being sold at the moment at different places and what have you. Voter apathy is a product of disaffection with government. Voter apathy is not a product of lack of knowledge of the electoral process. Yes, you can tie a little bit of it to say people need to now know that you cannot just be thumbprinting anymore, because electronic transmission of results says that as the election is finishing at the PU, the results are uploaded immediately. So if you go and thumbprint and bring it, it will not be recognized because the process would have been transmitted electronically. Now, that's another thing that if people know this, that they can literally be more excited about, okay, I should go out and vote. There's one last question. What is the third one? So what is INEC doing about collection of PVC to avoid disenfranchising potential voters? So one of the things INEC is doing that I can tell you is that INEC is re-strategizing and going into the communities and taking already registered and produced PVCs to communities where the people have not collected it before. And what INEC wants to do at the close of voter registration in June, they will mass produce all the PVCs and ensure that they are distributed between the last quarter of this year, so that by January, everybody who should have a PVC should have collected their PVCs. It's an ongoing work. The process is open to a lot of people. For those who have not collected theirs, please go and collect yours now. If you have not registered, please go online and register and begin the process, because this democracy depends on your participation and your willingness to hold politicians accountable. Go to their offices, demand that they should work. You see a bad road, tell them to fix it. You see a bad school, tell them to fix it. If you don't have light, call the government out. Tell them you need light because you are a tax-paying citizen. That is how we keep this country better than how we've made it. So I just hope I've been able to answer your questions, and I'll be glad to also take my leave. And thank you all for
so much,
inviting me.
Mr. God bless, for addressing these issues and for your closure and closing comment as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in on the conversation. Just before we go, let me quickly point out just 10 key provisions of the new Electoral Act. One, Clause 29 stipulates that parties must conduct primaries and submit their list of candidates at least 180 days before the general elections. We know a convention is currently going on at the moment, so that it can fit into this timeline. And then another party had already conducted theirs already. Secondly, Clause 65 states that INEC can review results declared under duress, which had been mentioned earlier by our guest speakers. Number 3, Clause 3 states that funds for general elections must be released at least 1 year before the election. Number 4, Clause 51 says that the total number of accredited voters will become a factor in determining overvoting at election tribunals. Number 5, Clause 54 makes provision for people with disabilities and special needs. Number 6, Clause 47 gives legislative backing for smart card readers and any other voter accreditation technology that the Independent National Electoral Commission, that's INEC, deploys. Number 7, Clause 34 gives political parties power to conduct a primary election to replace a candidate who died during an election. This is to correct what happened in Kogi State during late Prince Abubakar Audu's demise. Number 8, Clause 50 gives INEC the legal backing for electronic transmission of election results. Number 9, Clause 94 allows for early commencement of the campaign session. By this provision, the campaign season will now start 150 days to the election day and end 24 hours before the election. And lastly, Clause 84 stipulates that anyone holding a political office, be you a minister, commissioner, special advisor, amongst others, must relinquish the position before they can be eligible to participate in the electoral process, either as a candidate or as a delegate, for which we know is currently a subject of litigation at the moment, with one court setting it aside and another court injunction saying that the other courts do not have the power to nullify that particular part of the Electoral Act. So these are just few highlights. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in on this conversation that was put together by the Nigerian Global Affairs Council, which is a technology-based, digital, media-driven public policy and evidence-based research think tank focused on policy concerns that revolves around governance and public administration within the Nigerian state and how we interact with the larger society. Discussing today, we had Mr. Samson Itodo. We also had Yemi Adamoleku. We had God bless Otubure. Honorable TJ Ayo Yusuf was unable to join due to some commitments at his end, and he couldn't join in on the discussion today. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm very sure you learned one thing or something new, and your questions were addressed appropriately. We'd like to continue this conversation with you next month, so please endeavor to join the conversation in build up to the 2023 general election. Once again, my name is Abraham John Onoja, Director of Public Relations and moderator for the Nigerian Global Affairs Council Public Policy. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good day or night. Bye for now.
Arise, O compatriots, Nigeria's call obey, to serve our father's land with love and strength and faith. The labor of our heroes past shall be in vain. To serve with heart and might, one nation bound in freedom, peace and unity. O God of creation, direct our noble course. Guide our leaders right, and use the truth to know. In love and honesty to grow, and live in just and true. Great lofty heights attain, to build a nation where peace and justice shall reign.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, and good evening.